All right, welcome to another episode of the Rational Educator podcast. We're here with our education experts, Dr. Deanna Heikkinen and Dr. Andy Bernstein. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, Joel. Hey, Deanna. How you guys doing?
Great.
Doing well, thanks.
We are recording this episode in May of 2022, and we're doing this as most families are preparing for the end of the school year and looking forward to the long summer break. But for students, whether you're enrolled in public or private school, the state of education is still a dark and dangerous place. Deanna has some news that she wants to share with us.
So there's a story that's come out very recently today, and then basically the National Association of School Boards, or National School Board Association is the correct order of words there. They finished their investigation into that letter that came out last September that stated asking the FBI and asking for assistance from the White House on parent threats to school board members, people serving on school boards, and administrators in schools. And so in this letter, they listed some of the threats that were made against some of these school boards. And in the investigation, they found that the threats weren't physical threats. The parents were just angry. It's probably, I don't know example, or like all of these examples vary, I didn't see what happened, but I would imagine going to a pretty heated Little League game, the coaches and the parents probably have a little more, revved up emotions than what these parents and school board members. So basically there were these threats. And in this investigation, it came out that the original letter that was drafted by the then interim chair of the association asked for the National Guard to be called out in certain areas to protect the school board members and the schools from parents. And this is ridiculous. Parents were not threatening violence. They weren't threatening to go in and shoot, do any of this stuff. So it's really interesting. So this news cycle has come up today, and it got me thinking that at the end of the school year, this is the time where you need to start planning. I know a lot of parents, and particularly parents that I've talked to about homeschooling, don't want to pull their kids in the middle of the year. And so this is the time to start planning. You've got, 2.5, 3 months ahead of you, and you can take that time to figure out what you're going to do, how to withdraw the student, and come up with a curriculum and come up with an action plan and figure out a schedule. And so this is a perfect time to address different choices. So I wanted to talk about homeschooling because that's my area of expertise, where I've really been assisting parents and diving in and actually working with homeschool students. And I know Dr. Andy has some other expertise and some other options for parents to think about over this time over the summer too.
Oh, great. Thank you, Dr. D. But before I do that, I just want to say, comment on the viciousness of bringing in the National Guard to try to suppress parents who are protesting methods and contents being used in the schools. I mean, these leftist mentalities, they wouldn't call in the National Guard when terrorists were burning down Minneapolis, Seattle, and Portland, but they'll call in the National Guard when parents are protesting the grooming of children, or having these young kids read pornographic texts, or ramming critical race theory, which is pure unadulterated racism, down the throats of the kids. The parents are protesting this. That, of course, is worthy of military. And the National Guard is the military unit. That of course is deserving of military suppression. This is evil. It's just completely in reverse. You listen to the parents when they're protesting. You don't have to agree with them. You should. I think they're probably right in most cases, but you listen to them whether you agree or not. They're not violent, like Dr. D said, not even threatening violence. And you use the National Guard to suppress people who are violent. Namely Antifa, Black Lives Matter, these leftist terrorist organizations burning down cities and killing innocent people, destroying private property. Now, parents, let's get back to education. Yeah, here's the good news. There's a lot of things that parents can do. The parents have a lot of power here in education. Protesting at the school boards they deserve it without a doubt. But it's, E.D. Hirsch, a long time ago, called the government schools, an impregnable fortress. And I think that's right. They will not change. But the fact that they can't be changed doesn't mean they can be circumvented. We can get around it. There's a lot of things we could do to get around the abysmally poor education and the indoctrination of the government schools and, unfortunately, many of the private schools. One thing, of course, we mentioned over and over again on this podcast, and we will continue to, homeschooling. Homeschooling, there's different degrees, there's different formats, there's different styles. You don't have to do all the homeschooling by yourself, although there are parents who are not professional teachers who do a very good job of that. By the way, people who say, well, I'm not a teacher, you look at the abysmal results of the government schools. How good do you have to be to teach your kids better than the government schools are doing? And the answer to that is you don't have to be very good. But one thing we can all do, and mention this over and over again, is first of all, show the kids, so hopefully when they're younger, but even if they're older, and they're 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever, and they struggle with reading because of the crippling the rejection of phonics in the government schools. First of all, show the kids how fun books are. Get them books that they like, not books that you think they should like, but get the books, that they like, whatever it's about, whether it's about baseball or it's about, it's science fiction or it's about, plucky detectives like Nancy Drew or whatever it is. When my daughter was little, she found these books at Barnes and Noble that were, they were that kind of goofy stories about dogs who could fly and cats, kittens who thought the full moon was a bowl of milk and stuff like that. But that didn't matter. She at 2 years old, however old she was, they were fun. And so I read them to her. And once the kids find out that books are fun and there's all kinds of cool stuff in books that they like, then they're motivated to read. And then you can use systematic phonics. It's not that hard. The kids already know Dr. D, how many thousands of words does a typical youngster already have in their vocabulary? It's like thousands, right?
Yeah, and depending on the age, but yeah, by the time they're enrolling in school, they have a pretty wide vocabulary.
Yeah, right. So they already know thousands of words in the English language, and we teach them the letters and the sounds of the letters and the combination of the letters. There's only like 43 or 44 sounds in the
English language, yeah.
Right. And so they can sound out most of the words, on the printed page. They already know thousands of them. I think something like 87% of the English language is phonetic, that can be sounded out. It's only 13% that can't be sounded out. So they could sound out the overwhelming majority of the words, and they become proficient readers. It's not that hard. The good news is, the Wise girls, what's the name? Jessica Wise and Susan Wise Bauer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I call them the Wise girls. They stress in their book. What's the name of the book, Dr. D? I forget. It's really interesting.
Oh my gosh.
The effective mind or the well-trained mind.
The well-trained mind.
Okay, thank you. The well-trained mind. And I recommend it. It's a good book. You don't have to follow everything they say, but there's a lot of good information there. And the Wise girls make the point, reading is easy. Reading is easy. They say it over and over again because it's true. It's no harder than learning to ride a bike, for a healthy child, or to learn how to swim. It is no harder for a healthy child. And once you've taught your child to read, the whole world of knowledge is open to them on the internet, all the books at Amazon, so many of the classics are available for free on the internet or for a few bucks, via Amazon. The whole world of knowledge is open to them. And you can homeschool the kids, not just in reading, but in other subjects. There's all kinds of books out there you can get from Amazon. History Made Simple, math for dummies, and stuff like that. And you could teach the kids yourself. Like I said, you don't have to be that good to do a better job than the government schools do. Homeschool co-ops, Dr. Deanna, they're all over the country, right?
Absolutely. And the best way to find the homeschool co-ops is just on Facebook. And a lot of people are on Facebook. And if you're not on Facebook, maybe you have a friend who's on Facebook, but a lot of them have Facebook pages. So you just type in, homeschool co-op near me, and they'll pop up. You can also typically go to the state's homeschool organization website, and they will usually have a list of various co-ops. They're not always updated, but it's also a good place to start up. If you're a member of a church, you can usually find other people that are homeschooling or have some other community activities. You might find some other homeschool people and start networking. And then, ask around, see if anybody else is homeschooling.
Andy, you brought up a great point that one of the best places for parents to start is to just read a book about the subject. And The Well-Trained Mind is a book as any to begin, because many parents are stuck on the notion that it's difficult, even impossible. Reading a good book about someone else's experiences is a great way to believe that it's possible. And there are a great number of books on the subject, and The Well-Trained Mind is only one of them. Now, Deanna, you mentioned co-ops as the next point to explore. Let's define our terms a little bit. What is a co-op?
So a homeschool co-op is usually a group of parents that have gotten together and are sharing their resources. Sometimes it'll be through a church, and so they'll use the facility of a church. Sometimes they'll rent a building. Sometimes it's out of their homes. But basically, parents will pool their resources, whether that's their own mind. So say there's a parent who is a doctor. They can teach biology and they can teach some of the sciences. You have another parent who's an engineer. They can teach some math courses. You have a parent who is an artist. They can teach art, and so on and so on. They can also, there's usually a fee involved. So you pay a fee, and that can be a small fee all the way up to a larger fee, depending on the individual co-op, where it is, and how many teachers they have to hire out from within their parent or outside of their parent network. And so basically what it is, it's people coming together, pooling their resources, whether it's their intellectual resources or financial resources, to teach a group of kids. And this is under the guise of homeschooling because the parents are involved.
Because we need to think of homeschooling as a parent-driven exercise. And that's how the state sees it too. It's not a separate institution that you send your kids to. The state sees homeschooling as something that's driven by the parents.
Absolutely. And another thing about a co-op is that it's almost kind of like college for kids, because the kids will sign up for different classes. And the parents usually have to stay there while the kid is in class. So I know some parents that would take their kids to co-op, and then they would sit and have coffee with the other parents. Sometimes they'll go into the classrooms, and it's a very open environment, which is pretty unique to modern schooling, because even during the pandemic, when all the kids were on Zoom, there was a push to make sure that the kids had headsets and the parents weren't listening in onto the education. And so that's a very closed system. Co-ops are a very open system, or at least they should be. And so it's just one of the alternatives. Now, for a lot of states, when you decide to homeschool, you will have to declare that you're going to homeschool your student. And that is a letter to the district, usually to the district. And this is all by states, because education is left to the states. So the best thing to do is to go onto the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org, and look up your state and find out what the laws are. And in some states, when you declare homeschooling, you have different options. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to enroll them in some sort of online program. I'm going to find a co-op. And so some places have a little more, they want more paperwork, and they want to know more about what you're doing. Some places you don't even have to declare. I think there's a couple states where you don't even have to declare. But the reason why you declare are because of truancy laws. So if your kid is not in school, there needs to be a paper trail of why. Otherwise, you may have law enforcement knocking on your door. This is very important.
Yeah, that's another remnant of John Dewey's philosophy, isn't it? Truancy laws.
We can always thank Dewey for all these wonderful things.
Right. But so let's look at the calendar where we are today. Again, we're recording this in May of 2022. And what do parents need to think about as the current school year is ending, if they're interested in moving their children out of the current school system and into some kind of parent-driven educational program?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing you need to do is go to hslda.org and just look up the laws, the legalities, because you will want to, before the start of school. Now, you don't have to do it in June. You don't have to do it now, but over the summer, maybe later in the summer, you want to declare that you are going to homeschool in your state if it's required, and fill out the paperwork and just make sure that is all done correctly. The other thing you want to do is start researching about the types of homeschooling, because it's not a one size fits all education package like what we see in either public or private schools. I mean, this is kind of 30 kids sitting at a desk all doing the same thing. Unless your kids are going to Montessori and those more sort of open schools, it is a one size fits all pretty much all the way across the board. And so you need to decide, do you want to have a really structured? And a lot of people say they're going to have structured, they're going to do math from 8 to 9, and then they're going to do history or social studies, and then they're going to do like botany or ecology and go outside and take a walk. And they have this very structured schedule. And after about a week, and parent and child probably in tears of trying to do this and fit this mold of what you think school should be, you're going to realize that it can be much more fluid. And there are some statistics that I want to share with you. There's a recent survey from edchoice.org, and they said that 68% of the people who are homeschooling feel an increased sense of happiness. So students are happier when they're homeschooled. Families report 60% of the time, families are reporting having a more improved behavior. The children are behaving better. The families are happier. Everything is working better. And 70% of the people that were polled in the survey had a positive opinion of homeschooling. Now, that is a very different opinion than it was 5, 10, definitely 20 years ago. So homeschooling is no longer this, sort of weird thing that these, the kids down the street do because their families just doesn't fit in with the norm. Homeschooling is becoming more normal. In fact, it used to be about 2%, 3% of the children in the United States were homeschooled. That's jumped up to 6 to 9%. And the demographics of homeschooling, we're seeing more Black families, we're seeing more Latina families. And so it's not just something that, rural white Christians are doing. This is becoming more normal across the spectrum of our country, which is great.
And the minorities and the impoverished are the ones that are most hurt by the existing system.
Absolutely. And one of the fastest growing groups of homeschoolers are African Americans. And so that's really, really good to hear. So another thing is that if you're worried about the amount of national debt that we have and the future for your children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, taxpayers spend about $15,000 per student in public schools. Since more students are homeschooling, taxpayers are saving about $68 billion because of those homeschooled students now. Now, remember, school districts and schools get paid by student. So it's not that this much is going to go regardless. Now, there are some, kind of interesting things that are going on because more people are homeschooling and schools are worried about not getting their funding. But in general, it's $15,000 per pupil. And if your kid is taken away, then that school should lose that $15,000 every year.
And that number varies greatly by district.
Absolutely, yeah. And so just a couple other things. The first thing you do, find out the legalities. The second thing you do I want to have a structured homeschool? Do I want to, find a co-op? Start talking to parents. That's what I would do. Start talking
and
to
let's
parents.
really emphasize and underline that point, that whatever system that you think might be best at the beginning of your homeschooling journey is going to be completely turned upside down as you begin to find out what method of education your child actually responds best to. So I've interviewed dozens of homeschooling parents, and they all tell me the same thing. They all entered the beginning of this journey thinking that they were going to implement this one method that was going to last their child for their entire career in education, and only to find out that their child is completely different than what they thought they were going in. So many parents in particular read books like The Well-Trained Mind, which is a very ordered set of curriculum rules, as well as reading lists, subject matter. Latin is part of the educational process within the grade school levels. And with their best intentions, they think this is the best approach to take. And they find out that they swing over to a less structured method, like the unschooling methods that are also popular, where you have the child lead the education process through their own interests, study, demeanor as well. So the big takeaway from this is to be flexible and to really focus on who your child is as an individual, rather than the cookie cutter method that the modern school uses, which is the methods that you were trying to escape in the first place.
Right. And let me just make a couple of points here, Joel and Deanna. One point about being flexible is the possibility of hiring tutors. And you don't have to do this yourself. And remember something. Most of the teachers in the government schools are required to go through an education program. So they're taking a lot of education courses and consequently taking fewer courses in content that they're going to teach. The future teachers are taking fewer math courses than math majors take, and the future English teachers are taking fewer English courses.
Because the demand for the credential supersedes the demand for knowledge that you need in order to teach.
Exactly. Whereas if you hire tutors, here's the interesting thing, given the information age and social media, there are grad students all over the country, maybe all over the world, who are getting master's degrees and PhDs in real subjects, not in education, but they're getting degrees in chemistry and mathematics and literature and history and so on. And they have a bachelor's degree, not in education, but in these subjects. So they're much more expert in academic subjects than the high school teachers are, never mind the elementary school teachers. And they're graduate students. So for the most part, they don't have a full-time job. They don't have a lot of money. So you could hire them relatively inexpensively, and you can find them online. There's various websites. I can't remember the names. Is it Varsity? Deanna, you might know. So Varsity.
I don't know.
It's in my book on education, but I can't remember it. Offhand. But via LinkedIn or on Facebook or there are websites. But you could just Google Google websites for tutors, maybe, and you'll Google websites for tutors, and you'll find these organizations, or other homeschool parents, or through the homeschool co-ops. The point is, you could find tutors who are graduate students. They're expert, getting a PhD in chemistry, let's say. They're experts in chemistry, and they need to make money because they're students. And tutoring online, they could be at the University of Utah, and you could be in Florida, and you could tutor via Zoom. It's more convenient for them too than driving around being an adjunct professor at one college after another. They can make money right in their own living rooms, and they don't have a lot of money. They don't have a name yet or a rep, and so they're generally inexpensive. You can hire real experts in cognitive subjects, at relatively low prices to tutor your kids in these academic subjects. So tutors are a real viable option. Like I said, I think you just Google tutors, Google academic tutors or tutors for homeschoolers. I'm sure you can find the websites that I'm thinking of. Varsity Tutors may be one. I think varsitytutors.com, I think, may be one. One of them. Also, should we talk about microschools?
Yeah, it's definitely an option.
Yeah, let me just say something briefly, then you jump in, Dr. D. Just as there are many disgruntled parents in the schools, there are many disgruntled teachers. very often the best teachers, Marva Collins was a superstar of this, of this type. Very often the best teachers are frustrated by the rigid orthodoxy of the state-run school system, and they want out. They get burned out themselves and they leave the schools. More and more of these teachers are leaving the schools and starting their own schools. It's so common a phenomenon that Forbes magazine, a business magazine, ran a story on this, a year or so ago. Micro schools, they're really just small community schools. A disgruntled teacher talks to dissatisfied parents and maybe has 2 or 3 families or maybe more, and they set up a school, maybe in one of the parents' basements or something like that. And I know regarding homeschool, some states make it difficult for parents to teach the children of other parents, but it's easier for a licensed teacher, right? It's easy, right? Isn't Dr. D? It's easier for a licensed teacher
Absolutely.
to set up a school.
Again, it's going to depend on each state because each state is going to have their own regulations on that.
But I think isn't it generally true that the state will place fewer obstacles in the path of a licensed teacher starting in a
who
private
opens up
school,
a school as opposed to like if a parent wants to start a school in their basement. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So you find a disgruntled teacher, and there are a lot of them, and understandably so. Somebody who goes into education idealistically, and he or she really wants to educate the kids, and then runs up against the rules and regs of the government system and the unions and everything, and get burned out and is sick of it and ready to leave. Well, they find that they could pursue their real values of education with a small micro school, with a small, community school, starting out with just a few families. So your parents, you might be able to find 1 or 2 of such teachers at your kids' schools. There's evidently a lot of them, and it's understandable that there are.
Absolutely. And the tutors is a really good thing to think about also, because if you parents are deciding to homeschool, they can maybe say, okay, I can cover literature because I was a big reader and I loved, and I read a lot and I know some about literature. Math, well, they're not that advanced, and there's Khan Academy, so I think we're covered there. But I don't know anything about science. So another thing to think about over the summer, so you're getting your legal ducks in a row, you're kind of doing a little research on the different types of options you have, whether it's a co-op, whether you're going to hire tutors, if you're going to try to have a structured program, or if you're going to unschool. So you're learning some of these different options. The next thing to think about is curriculum. And there are a lot of different ways to go for curriculum. You can do secular, you can do religious. I mean, pretty much if you can dream it, then I'm sure that curriculum is out there. And there are some really good repository websites for homeschool curriculum. Just Google homeschool curriculum. And there's a lot of sites that have already done a lot of reviewing of curriculum, and you can read through and decide if you want to do a full package or if you want to piecemeal it together yourself. If you're going to do a co-op, maybe you want to supplement different things. Maybe you have a tutor for this subject to do co-op for that subject, and the rest you want to do yourself. But the biggest thing about whatever you decide when you decide to homeschool is flexibility. Parents have to be flexible. You have to know that there are days when everyone, including yourself, may melt down, and you just stop and say, okay, we're going to bake cookies. And all of a sudden you're doing a math lesson because you're doing fractions by dividing up the ingredients. Okay, I need a tablespoon. What does a tablespoon equal? So now you're doing conversions. And you just change, or you take a walk and you pull out your phone and you identify plants, and all of a sudden you're doing botany. And so just know that those sorts of flexibility moments are going to have to be there for you and the student.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dr. D. And I remembered one of the websites I was thinking of is outschool.com.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about school.
Yeah. Which comes highly recommended to me from a homeschooling mom who's very good. So outschool.com, you can find tutors and tutoring. And I think varsity.com or maybe varsitytutors.com. I forget what's one of varsity.com or varsitytutors.com.
It's varsitytutors.com.
Thank you, Joe. So varsitytutors.com is another place where you can find tutoring and tutoring services. So there's a lot of options for parents who've had it with the school system.
And rightfully so. So Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also important for parents to find a network of parents who have gone through the process themselves or who are beginning this journey, because you're going to need people to talk to. You may find yourself feeling, if you're doing this all by yourself, that it might be, you might feel as if it's an impossible task. But networking with other parents is going to give you a lot of examples, a lot of people to talk to, and the belief that it can actually be done, which is the first hurdle ultimately.
Absolutely. And networking doesn't have to be face to face. In our digital age, you can find groups of people, you can Zoom, you can, do different methods of getting together and sharing resources, sharing stories, both good and bad, having someone that you can call up on those days that you just want to say, forget it, I'm enrolling them into the public school tomorrow. And so it's as much about parents and kids. So I thought it was important to talk about this at the end of the school year. Also important to talk about it at the beginning of the school year, the middle of the school year, anytime, but specifically now as parents have this sort of downtime of the summer to really start thinking this and putting a plan into action. And I have some stats here. So if I know there's usually a lot of anxiety from the parents that I've spoken to about homeschooling, about performance, about socialization, all of those things. And it is not the case. Homeschool students score into the 15th to 30th percentile points higher on standardized tests than public school students. 87% of homeschool students showed positive outcomes on social development rather than traditional school students. They score higher on social development. 69 showed positive success rates among adults compared to conventional schools. 68% of parents say their children were learning more at home, and 65% of the children were enjoying learning more and were more interested in school than in public or private schools. Or actually, this is all public, so than in public schools. And so there's a lot of data out there, and there's Forbes has done research, like Dr. Andy said. They've also done research on why parents decided to homeschool, particularly during the pandemic. The National Homeschool Education Research Institute, they have probably some of the best statistics. NHERI is the what you would just Google. EdChoice has done a lot of research. So do your due diligence, look into what the laws are, what the research says, how to connect with other families that are also homeschooling in your area, or even maybe not in your area, but that you can connect with online, and just start making these decisions and putting that ball in action. And the other
do it
thing
now, because pretty soon, the summer is going to get away from you.
Absolutely. And another thing is involve your kids in the conversation. Yeah, you might want to talk to your spouse first, and maybe some other family members, if grandparents or aunties and uncles live nearby, that you're going to need a little more family support because you have two working parents or whatever. Maybe you do the adult conversations first, but early in the process, bring your kids in and let them have ownership of their own education for the first time in their life. It's going to matter.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I just want to make one last point before we sign off, and that is another reason that a lot of parents homeschool is because in the government schools there's often problems with bullies, with drugs, and with crime, and you could obviate that situation at home where your kids are with you, with mom or dad or both, and so you got safety. It really is what that comes down to. You can understand why parents, based on that alone, make that choice. Never mind the cognitive advantages, the academic advantages of homeschooling your kids. So there's a lot of reasons why parents do this.
That's one of the big reasons why minorities, inner city parents are some of the fastest growing members of the homeschool community.
Understandable.
And also you can go to rationaleducator.com, and we have a Get Started Homeschooling little section on the website, and there's a lot of information that I personally have been talking about, some things that Dr. Andy's been talking about also that we have up on the website. So if you didn't get everything down, just go to rationaleducator.com and click on the homeschooling menu bar, and there's a lot of information there for you.
And we also have Dr. Deanna and Dr. Andy available for tutoring.
Yes, we both are experienced tutors. That's right.
Absolutely. And I work with homeschool students, and Dr. Andy's worked with homeschool students. So
yes, that's
absolutely.
Correct.
All right. So thanks again for coming to this episode of The Rational Educator, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Deanna. Thanks, Joel.
Bye, Andy.
Bye.